According to data released by Universities South Africa, close to 200,000 spaces are available at the country's 26 universities for first-year students. Now, this follows the release of the matric results of the class of 2022. So, let's find out if the institutions have enough capacity to accommodate the anticipated influx of students. And we are joined now by Dr. Phethiwe Matutu. She is the CEO of Universities South Africa. Dr. Matutu, thank you very much for your time. So, let's go back to the figures that I have mentioned in that introduction. 200,000 spaces in all of the 26 universities that exist in South Africa. How big is the demand? Does it exceed this 200,000?
Firstly, let me greet you, Oli, together with the viewers of Newzroom Afrika, and congratulate the class of 2022 for the excellent performance. Looking at the demand versus the supply of spaces, certainly there is room for growth that we should be looking at because the demand for higher education is quite enormous. We have 278,000 bachelor passes. So that already is above the 196,000 that is available right now. But let me qualify that. It depends now on the quality of the passes because universities have entry requirements for programs. So depending on how the students have done in terms of the gateway subjects, in terms of the languages, and in terms of whatever minimum requirements that universities have. We'll have access to universities. And let's be very clear that there are other students who are not keen on going to university, although they performed well. They would prefer other colleges, depending on the skill set that they would like to acquire. So universities is not everything for everyone. And others would prefer to go to the private higher education subsector.
All right. So we're going to explore the other options if you are not a person who feels that university is where you would like to go post-matric. How have you dealt in the recent past with the issue of too much demand and there is simply no space to accommodate the students?
We normally deal with it by looking at the demands for the programs that we have. And on the basis of those demands, some students get accepted, and you'll find out that there are those who do not get accepted. So it's usually the quality of the pass which determines whether a student is in or out. And it's seldom that a student qualifies and yet you find out that they cannot be accommodated within the program. However, at a departmental level also, they are looking at various options of expansion. So we do have the Tveit colleges, which have been promoted a lot by the department, for instance. We do have the community colleges, which have been promoted by the department. So students who do not qualify sometimes can get into these avenues.
So let's talk then about the options that ought to be available to students who may not necessarily be interested in going to university for one or other reason. What options are there? Because I wonder if the students know about these options and how well advertised these options are, so that the universities in the future can avoid this issue of supply or over-subscription.
As I mentioned, the entire picture is the post-school education and training. So the university sector there, it constitutes 65% of that post-school education and training. The rest are the Tveit colleges and the community colleges. So there is that option of getting into those which constitute about 35% of the entire pie.
Do you find that students are aware of these options, particularly the institutions where vocational studies are promoted?
I do think that the Department of Higher Education and Training has done a lot of work to promote them. And also, they have done a lot of work to ensure that there's better alignment between the skills and what the private sector requires. Because these are the areas where we're talking about the production of skills which have to match our own economy. So there's been a lot of work done in that respect. Right now, for instance, they are busy looking at the curriculum, the demand for the programs, introducing new ones, and stopping those which are no longer serving the Tveit sector. So it is an area that the department has focused a lot of effort into. And looking at the shape and the size of our system, it is evident that that is where our post-school education and training sector is supposed to be growing more. The one of Tveit colleges, because they tend to service the graduates that universities produce. So if you are talking about a typical engineer, will be assisted by 4 or so of the graduates of the Tveit colleges. So it doesn't make sense then to have the same number of the graduates coming from higher education and those coming from Tveit. The Tveit is supposed to be a bigger subsector than the higher education subsector within the broader scheme of the post-school education and training sector.
Okay, so it is supposed the Tveit College sector is supposed to be the biggest subsector. Is that what you are finding in practice, that that sector is growing exponentially?
No, it's not growing as anticipated and as envisaged, and there are reasons for that. So you can't allow it to grow outside your resource availability. So the resources are tied together with the growth, and the universities as well. They are an old subsector within the post-school education and training, so they've been there forever. Others have finished more than 100 years within South Africa. So you find out that the turning of the bias by parents, by students, all of that has to be looked at together with the private sector as well.
All right. Dr. Matutu, final question then, and very briefly if you can. The tertiary institutions of which you speak for, security has been raised as a major issue. Let me say safety and security, given the events that have occurred in Phethiwe. How concerned are you as the CEO of Universities South Africa, and are you at all reassured by the utterances of the Minister of Higher Education and Training, who recently attended a funeral of an official that was killed in Phethiwe?
We believe that a whole lot more can be done in that respect, and we're working together with the Department of Higher Education and Training to ensure that that happens.
All right, let's leave the conversation there. Dr. Phethiwe Matutu, she is CEO of Universities South Africa.